And I do visit San Antonio quite a lot. But yeah, it is, as Chevy said, it is quite late here in the UK. So if I do start yawning halfway through, I'm not bored of my own voice. I am just a little bit tired. So yeah, just to I suppose to start to give a little introduction to myself and my background. I think I just wanted to talk about my roles. I think when most people ask me what I do, I typically just respond with I'm a designer. It's kind of the most easy way to respond to people. But in reality, my role has changed massively over the years. And I typically wear different hats dependent on the type of job that I'm working on. So I started my career back in early 2000s, working on simple websites, email campaigns, poster designs, logos, etc. But then started specializing a lot more in the world of digital and web design in particular. And the agency that I was working for most of my career started to get involved in much bigger and bigger contracts. So UX design in particular became a much bigger factor within my role. And then I grew into management roles, ended up as a creative director for over 10 years, which was incredibly varied as a role. Typically involved a lot of early strategy work, stakeholder consultations, setting overall UX and creative direction, solving a lot of the big problems that our clients had, and then managing that through my team. And the majority of the projects that I worked on, sort of especially in sort of later years, were quite large scale web platforms, including a few multi-million-pound projects, which seems insane, but yeah, they were long-term projects. A lot of these were quite complex on quite technical platforms with advanced personalization, marketing automation, etc. So lots of heavy planning work involved, user testing, semi-agile build processes, etc. So I feel like, although I sort of typically kind of see myself as more as a creative, I do tend to have a fairly technical brain as well. I learned to code when I was in my late teens and work closely with development teams and product owners throughout projects to create functional spec, getting involved in user testing. So very, very, very varied. In the past few years, literally for about a year and a half, well, I left the agency world and set up my own small studio. Really missed more of that kind of hands-on aspects of designing and making websites myself. So I'm currently working within my studio, creating a lot of websites, doing a lot of app projects, building websites as well, and using a lot of no-code tools like Webflow. So yeah, that's pretty much me in terms of what I do. I'm not sure whether this slide will work in terms of all the animations over Zoom, but I haven't got a fancy show reel yet, or even a website. I've literally been too busy building everyone else's websites. So I've just created a simple slide really to show a few examples of the types of work that I've been involved in. Obviously just a quick snapshot, but a lot of the work I would say I work on is typically what I would class as marketing websites or e-commerce, app design. But that's just a selection. In the past, I've worked on internal systems, lots of sort of digital products. So lots of variation in the type of work that I do tend to get involved with. And then client-wise, I thought twice about putting this on here because you guys over in America might not recognize a lot of these clients with them being mostly European based. But I've probably specialized more in the world of sport over the last 5 or 6 years. So lots of work for large sporting organizations like the Football Association here in the UK, lots of football clubs, football players, or sorry, should I say soccer, lots of education establishments, colleges, universities, health, medical clients, and the rest really. I've kind of worked across entertainment, across technology, recruitment, manufacturing, music. So that's the best thing for me really about these sort of years that I've had in the industry is working in a digital agency. You get such variety in terms of the type of work and clients. You're always learning about new areas, different sectors, and experiencing sort of the needs of different types of people. So yeah, like I said, I'm currently running what I'm sort of defining as a purposely small studio that is focused on digital work, but at the same time, I am doing one-off kind of large strategy projects, UX projects, bits of design, bits of branding, and a lot of my clients, I'm actually doing all of that for them, which is kind of what I enjoy the most, really. It's having that ownership of kind of the brand and the experience. So yeah, I'm mostly working with UK-based clients, but I do have a few international clients and work as well with a few digital agencies here in the UK. The project that I'm sort of mostly involved in at the minute was actually a recent finalist at South by Southwest in their pitch competition, which unfortunately I was on vacation when that happened, so I didn't get to make the trip to Austin. But that's a big app project for a lot of celebrities across sport, music, entertainment. So lots of exciting stuff on the go. So yeah, that's me. Enough about me, and on to the topic of today's talk. So I've titled this "The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly," which is reality. It's a bit of a sort of a sideways look at UX and design across the web, and what we can learn from it. And I wanted to start by I think it's important to understand the web, to kind of go back in time a little bit and to almost kind of revisit its origin. And I likened it a little bit to the Wild West, where at the start, when I first got involved with web design, literally anything went. It was chaos. It was a time when people were really sort of unsure about the possibilities of the technology. It felt like something that anyone with a slightly technical mindset would want to get involved in and want to start creating something with. So this time, obviously, when I was fresh out of school, and the big web platforms that we're now so accustomed to, the likes of Amazon, Facebook, etc., were yet to be born. We had people like me, we had people like this Bobby here, who played their part in sort of shaping the early web. And this is an example. I think I've noticed there's quite a few young people on the call. So this is an example of what a website looked like back in the day when I first got involved. And this is a GeoCities website. You can see it's on Netscape Navigator, a really early browser. And this is the sort of stuff that was getting created. And it wasn't just Bobby. In fact, I've no idea who this Bobby guy is. I just like the look of him. But the internet was open for everyone really to create their own space. There was lots of these simple web building tools were made available really early on. I think back to things like GeoCities, things like Tripod, where I built all of my first early websites. And literally anyone could come on and build their own sort of super simple website. And yeah, they did. Even little Papa Bob here. I think the exciting thing back then was that the barrier was removed to creativity. I think if you think that if anyone had wanted to get involved in creating, I don't know, say a brochure or an advertisement, there was obviously cost involved in all of that, and it was quite a difficult process to get involved in if you hadn't had training and you didn't have connections. So I think when the web started, a lot of people got excited about it that weren't necessarily from a design background. So if we're starting to talk about ugly web design, I think that's where a lot of it stems from. It's people getting involved in the web that weren't interested in design. They didn't have sort of design training. They didn't understand the sort of things like typography and visual composition, as you can tell. It was also really restrictive back in those days as well. So you had limited fonts that you could choose from. Most people had little to no image editing capabilities. So early examples like this Space Jam one that you can see in the top right, which is actually still live, believe it or not, if you did want to have a look at it, that almost became a little bit of a design classic back in the day, because it was deemed to be quite creative and less boxy and utilizing sort of custom imagery, etc. So yeah, it was a bit of a crazy era, and those that were involved back then will recognize a lot of these types of graphics, where you had people creating guest books on websites where people could leave messages. You had 3D type, you had lots of animated GIFs and hit counters on websites where people could show how many people had visited their website. So it was, I kind of wanted to show these because I think it's important. If we think that some websites are bad now, when we get frustrated with websites, like, you've just got to sort of go back in time sometimes and realize how bad it literally was. It really wasn't pretty. So yeah, just a bit of context to it, really. And as I say, I think it was one of those first mediums where non-designers could go nuts and design something random, something basic themselves. So it was never really going to be great. So yeah, let's fast forward a little bit to the current day, and I wanted to start with the ugly side of things, and probably focusing a little bit more on the kind of the visual design aspect here. But obviously visual design has a massive impact on everything, not just obviously what you think in terms of what it looks like. It impacts the user experience too. So I think I just wanted to kind of pick out a few examples of current websites that are live on the internet at the minute that are pretty horrific in terms of what they look like, and a little bit to explore maybe some of the reasons why. So the first one, Exhibit A, that we have here is an American website. It's a Pacific Northwest X-ray company, which, yeah, you have to kind of see it to believe it, really, to sort of believe that this is something that is still live on the internet. It looks like it was created in 1990. It probably was, to be fair, but the fact that this is live still blows my mind. So I thought I'd just kind of get my browser over. Can you guys see my browser if I drag that over? Is that, yeah, cool. So this is like a properly functioning website. So it's got all the kind of the hallmarks of an old school 1990s website, the repeating background images, the random images as bullet points, the horrible kind of animated GIFs up at the top that don't seem to be working at the minute, but that has some weird flashing animation on when I last looked at it. But it works. You can go in, you can search for products, all these X-ray based products, got these horrible kind of like bevels on buttons, and all of these kind of like just horrifically laid out pages with awful tables and really sort of bad imagery. So yeah, it's got kind of a really sort of weird nostalgic kind of vibe to it for me. But I thought I'd kind of put that one in there because that's almost kind of showing the fact that all of the stuff that I was showing on the previous slides, there are still sites out there that have that kind of look and feel to them. I think there's also some that are maybe a lot older and still kind of feel as if they've been designed in the 90s, but have maybe more of that kind of reserved sort of style to them, where everything was literally built in tables. So if people on the call are sort of familiar with sort of code, early websites were built with tables where you were just limited to kind of columns and building stuff like you would do like a Microsoft Word table, basically. So everything started to feel and look a little bit like a Microsoft Word document, and you'd have all these text links and these multi-column kind of page layouts. I think this Superior Web Solutions one is a bit of a favorite of mine, just how obviously this is a company that is specializing in website design and website development, and this is their showcase website. And you click into it and some of the pages don't work because Adobe Flash is no longer supported. So someone is either running this business successfully somehow, I've no idea how, or they've just continued to pay for hosting and I've completely forgotten about it. And they're wasting money on a monthly basis. But yeah, it's a bit of a shocker.
Please.
Oh, sorry, was that a question? No, all good.
She wasn't on mute. Sorry.
No worries. I assumed that. That's cool. Exhibit 3 again is a current website. This is for the James Bond Museum in Sweden, and this is where we kind of venture into the world of scrolling. It's literally like someone has gone, yeah, I really like the way Facebook works. It's just a big scrolling feed. Let's just kind of do something like Facebook. So there's no navigation. You can't really navigate the website, or you can't find any of this content. It's literally like they've uploaded their flyer to the header image, because you've still got a QR code at the top of a website, which is a classic. And then, yeah, it's just this big, horrible, endless scroll. So I don't know if you can see my scroll bar there, but this goes on and on and on and on, which is just insane. And I was looking at it sort of thinking, this can't still be a thing. This can't be. I wonder if he's still actively promoting this museum and this is actually the website. And you'll notice, obviously, there are some social media sort of links in there. So I was looking on it and I was thinking, is he still active on Instagram? And this post is literally 2 days ago or 3 days ago. So I think he's probably just a little bit too busy taking selfies of himself, looking like James Bond to worry about his website. But it's a beauty. I love just the randomness of all the sort of images, the video embeds, everything's kind of different sizes, the text's different sizes, just really basic fonts and link colors. It's bizarre that these things still exist, but yeah, one of my favorites. This one's an interesting one. This one is, well, you guys will be familiar with it being an American college. So this is for the Yale School of Art. So I'm obviously not American, but I've heard of Yale. I know it's a prestigious college. And it genuinely feels, when I looked at this, it genuinely feels like this is a tongue-in-cheek kind of approach. It's obviously that they've done it on purpose. Again, it's got lots of hallmarks of old school websites with the repeating background images. Half of these kind of animate as well. So when you're on, you go on to, I think it's like about the school. They've got these nice sort of flashing background images that are tiled. But this is to promote an art school in 2023. So I don't know. It's obviously some kind of like, this is obviously part of the creative brief to kind of try and create something that looks and feels a little bit random and a little bit odd. And maybe it's an attempt to get a bit of PR and get people kind of talking about it, or get people remembering it, which again, I think it probably does quite well. It's if you're going to be comparing multiple art schools and you come to this, it's obviously going to be the one that you're probably going to remember, but not necessarily for the right reasons. So again, it's one of those that when I first looked at it, I was like, this has got to be a joke. But actually when I started looking at it, all the content's there. It's just a bit of a design style. And again, I quite like it just from a nostalgic perspective. But I think if my kids looked at that, I think they would be very, very confused. Exhibit 5. So let's start looking at kind of animation, really. I think like animation and transitions are a big thing on modern websites. You get a lot of designers trying to create really slick, moving experiences, but any form of animation is obviously a craft. And this site, when I looked at it, just made me think of bad PowerPoint slides. It genuinely feels like someone's just exported a PowerPoint animation up and included it on their header. So I think that there's a lot of sites out there that definitely go overboard on animation without really thinking about how it complements the experience. And I think this example probably does a good job of drawing your eye, but it's just very ugly, isn't it? Exhibit 6. This is one of my favorites. This is a bit of a UK classic. So you might have seen this, you might not have done, but this is again a real functioning website for a car rental company here in the UK, or a car leasing company. And believe it or not, this is actually quite a successful website. So when you first come onto it, you think this has got to be like a bit of a random joke, a bit of a sort of a PR type thing. But you can see as you start to scroll, if I go back to the homepage, actually, this is just a listing of all the different cars that you can lease from this person, who genuinely, I've Googled it, she's a real person. She's got interviews on YouTube. She's done it as a bit of a PR stunt, and apparently it's worked. She gets a lot of business and a lot of repeat business. She's got obviously reviews on Trustpilot and the likes. But again, it's one of those where it's like it's obviously purposefully trying to be as crazy as it possibly can be. I think some of my favorite bits is when you click into some of the cars. Obviously, you get like the basic information presented in a really kind of crazy sort of weird format. Lots of nice little animated GIFs of Ling. But then there was a bit just further down the page where she starts sort of comparing the price of the car to cigarettes. So cars versus fags. Cigarettes are known as fags in the UK. I know that's slightly different in America, but in the UK, it's a cigarette. So she's kind of comparing the price of a car to cigarettes, and then she's got a bit where you can compare it to the price of a Big Mac. So really kind of unusual kind of tactics, and obviously an unusual design presentation. But again, it's a sight to behold, really. It's something that you're definitely going to remember, whether it's something that you would be sort of happy using, and whether you can easily find information on it, I would definitely question. But it's it's a very famous website over here, actually. And then this one, which basically we sort of claims to be the world's worst website, which was one that Sherry actually sort of shared with me early on when we started talking about this talk. Again, another kind of tongue-in-cheek website that sort of looks at terrible design practices. It's really worth kind of having a click around here, because there's lots of things that you sort of think altogether this is just a crazy mess, but actually individual elements you still do see on a lot of websites. So things like these little marquees that are sort of constantly animating across the page, bits where kind of bits of code have exposed, and horizontal scrolling that's forced onto the user. It's a bit of it's a work of art, really, in terms of sort of displaying like terrible website designs. So yeah, that's kind of the ugly side of things. When I sort of started thinking about the bad, I was starting to look more into, I suppose, the ones I previously looked at were maybe more design focused. I wanted to look at ones that were maybe more kind of a mixture of design and kind of UX practices as well, and look around how certain types of websites or certain sectors typically have terrible websites, and can sometimes be this kind of frustrating mess. So the first thing I want to look at was kind of the comparison between reading the news in real life with a real newspaper, and how that's obviously a quite nice, relaxing early morning habit that lots of people have. And then the kind of the frustrating, kind of seriously bad equivalent that you sometimes get on newspaper sites online. And I think I'm conscious a lot of the examples that I've shown so far have been sort of desktop. When I browse the news and I kind of click on links on Facebook or LinkedIn on my mobile device, that's when I tend to get the worst experience. And this, believe it or not, is a live website of one of my local newspapers here in England. It's the Yorkshire Evening Post. And yeah, it's kind of a very good example of the kind of the pain that you have browsing a modern news website, where they're constantly trying to sell advertising space, and they're constantly pushing that onto you as a user. So this is an article about people queuing up for events, which feels like a very British subject matter, but that's not that important. It's more the fact that the article itself probably takes up about 5% of the real estate on the page. The rest is taken up by adverts, sponsored posts, other important interface elements. And I mean, I'm literally looking at this on the homepage, and you've got on the article page, so you've got a bit up at the top that's trying to get you to another article. You've got an advert telling you that a restaurant has lunch and dinner available. I mean, yeah, go figure. And then you've got another kind of advert at the top above the article title, which is a video. It's actually a video about the article, but there's a 20-second advert beforehand. And then fixed to the bottom of the browser is another advert telling me that lunch and dinner is available at a restaurant. So it's like literally the most frustrating experience you could imagine. But it gets worse. You even on this article, it's what I would class as a listicle. It's like a list of different things, 20 of the biggest cues. And this is then broken up over multiple pages. So it's not just you're getting these adverts. To get kind of to the next bit of the article, you have to find this next page button to click on it. That then loads another page with more adverts. You've got adverts popping up as you scroll, little video adverts at the bottom. I genuinely have no idea why anyone would ever return to visit this website. And it's common across a lot of newspaper sites. So this is another local newspaper of mine where you've got similar issues where menus are taking up way too much space. You've got loads of adverts here. This one's for Deliveroo, which is a bit like Uber Eats. I don't know if you get Deliveroo in the States, but Deliveroo isn't even available in Ilkley. So it's all this advertising space is taken up, but it's not even relevant to the location. And then you scroll down here, you get survey pop-ups, you get adverts fixed at the top, adverts in between content. These are adverts that are exposed that take up the full screen. And then towards the bottom, you just get this huge kind of list of sponsored posts. So I've done a really quick screen recording here just to kind of to prove to you that this is real. And yeah, you can see it's got this weird thing where the adverts don't load and the everything jumps around. I keep getting advertised candlelight concerts for some reason. I have no idea why. Obviously, some of the advertising is probably quite targeted in terms of hair transplants. But yeah, more candlelit concerts, horrible watches. You can see it's just constant. And that's the article. So the article is literally about 6 paragraphs. And then after that, this is just a massive feed of sponsored posts for that are aimed at basically taking me away to other websites and to make the publisher obviously a little bit of money in terms of ad revenue. But it's things around buying property in Dubai, liposuction, teeth surgery, all stuff that mostly has no relevance to me whatsoever. And this, believe me, this video, I say it's a short video, it continues for ages and ages before you get to any sort of actual sort of useful sort of links at the bottom of the page, which explore more articles on the website. So it's beyond belief, really. And it's a bit of I kind of wanted to make sure that this wasn't just a UK thing. So I looked at a few kind of American examples, and these were just as bad. I mean, that you can hardly even see the article on this example. And then I looked at some San Antonio examples as well, again, just to make sure there was some kind of local problems. And some of them, to be fair, some of the ones I did look at were nowhere near as bad, but still I was on like the current, and what this one is, KSAT, where you've got just this constant kind of ad exposure as you're browsing the content. So I sort of like, I look at these and I compare them to that experience that you get with a real newspaper. And fair enough, newspapers are full of classified ads. There's loads of adverts in newspapers, but they're static, they're not interruptive, they're not disruptive to you reading the content, and they don't stop you going and buying a newspaper again. I genuinely have no idea why people return to these types of websites to take in news, and it's a real big problem that needs to be solved. I know it's a delicate balance from their perspective in terms of sort of selling commercial sort of revenue advertising decisions, but it really hampers the sort of experience for the user. Then I kind of looked at e-commerce. So a lot of my frustrations when I'm browsing the web are when I'm looking at shops, and like the cookie problem is just again out of control to me. I can't believe that this is still a thing in 2023. But my biggest gripe with these is the consistency. It's like everyone is different. Every sort of like the look and feel of them, the placement, the wording, they're all completely different. And yeah, I know they're getting phased out at some point, but it's just infuriating as you start to browse e-commerce sites at the minute. And likewise, you're getting this constant kind of badgering to sign up to newsletters before you even start looking at the products. This is the Levi's site where I visited, and the first thing that it showed me was a big pop-up to get me to sign up to the newsletter. Then before I could even do anything, it had to accept cookies, and then I get into it, and it's just this really kind of uninspiring kind of first view that's trying to push specific offers. And the worst one that I found, again, was a UK-based one. I don't know if this is available in the US as well, Shine or Sheen. I'm not sure how it's worded. But again, just pop-ups galore as you start to enter the site. And then this view on mobile just blew my mind. It's like literally you've got a pop-up at the top of a little drop-down encouraging you to open or download the app. You've got multiple little banners and offer kind of banners going on. You've got multiple layers of menu systems up at the top. You've got banners that are obviously designed for desktop that are just shrunken down so you can hardly read the text. And then you've got more navigation down at the bottom to try and make it feel like an app experience. It's literally, it's terrible. And this is the website version, which is pretty much exactly the same. You close a pop-up, another pop-up comes up, you close that one, and then you get another pop-up before you even able to sort of browse any products. And then even then it's just loads of images. So it looks like a very sort of inaccessible, sort of overwhelming platform. And then kind of the polar opposite, I looked at the Zara website. So this is, I think they've obviously tried to kind of throw away the typical e-commerce rule book and go for more of a magazine page layout where it's more kind of just a sort of visual and hopefully like a visually inspiring feed of images relating to their clothes. But it's not really obviously doing the most to kind of highlight specific products. And then even the navigation itself, you'll have seen when that opened up, it's really poor with like really tiny text, strange formatting. Even the kind of the product pages, when you first go on, it's a single image before you get to kind of browse all the different types of shoes, for example. So yeah, that's a good example of kind of the polar opposites. One that's gone for like a really sort of clean look that is still not a great experience, and one that's gone for one that's just over the top and just trying to push as much as possible to you, which is probably even worse. Next is forms. So there's lots of millions of bad examples of forms out there, and I didn't want to kind of go through loads of them. I just wanted to highlight a website that a lot of you might have seen already and sort of played around with, but it's a website called User in Your Face. And it's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek kind of platform designed to highlight some of the worst kind of practices in UI, UX design. So it's worth having a little bit of a play around with. Got these things where they're kind of doing the opposite to what you would expect, and the links are in the wrong place. I'm not even figuring out what I do. Yeah, there we go. And then you kind of like click on the password field and you start typing, and it's done it. It doesn't get rid of the label. It's just got loads of the typical frustrations that you might have with form-based websites and registration processes, etc., all wrapped up in one kind of infuriating experience. So yeah, maybe don't spend too much time in, but it's a nice to have a little bit of a play around with. This one, lastly, I just wanted to show a really recent experience I had on Donald Glover's new studio website. So he's just literally creating a new creative studio, or setting up a creative studio. And I saw a tweet promoting the fact that he was doing this and thought, oh, that's interesting. So I thought I'll take a quick look. It's a really nice, actually quite a nice website. You've got this kind of big video up at the top of him coming on, talking about what the studio is and the fact that he's looking to employ people. And you've then got just like a really simple list of roles that are available that you can apply for. But I looked at it, and the first thing that I thought was like, well, where's it based? Is it a remote working thing? Is it based in New York? Is it San Fran, somewhere like that? And then I noticed up at the top that it said Bradford, England. and I got very, very confused, because believe me, Bradford, England is not far from where I live. And it's a very industrial city that Donald Glover is not going to want to set up a creative studio in. So it took me a few seconds to realize, actually, this is just them showing me where I live. But it seemed just like a very odd thing to do on a website promoting roles for a new studio. So little things like that, just kind of, you see things and you sort of think, how on earth has that design decision been signed off? And how has no one flagged that during testing, that might be a bit of a weird thing when someone comes onto the site. I mentioned earlier a little bit around animation, so I wanted to kind of go back and talk about some of the kind of the sites out there. And you see a lot of these type of sites that are almost kind of doing animation for animation's sake. And one of my biggest bugbears and any kind of interaction is scroll hijacking, where basically the kind of the speed and the effect of the scroll has been manipulated through code. And this example, which is for I think it's like a security company, you literally, if I just naturally scroll on my mouse, it takes you past it literally takes you past the content. You've got to kind of like really, really slowly kind of scroll your wheel on your mouse to kind of be able to digest any of the content. Just the normal scroll that I would do takes me to the bottom of the website more or less straight away. And that's, I mean, it's a design aesthetic perspective. You might think it looks nice and it's quite quirky, but the actual purpose of the website, to be able to explain what they do, is completely missed because someone's just wanted to do a really sort of nice scroll effect. And then lastly, I think if you guys are on Twitter, I thought I'd include these just because there's a guy on there that I follow called Soren Iversen, who has started doing these little design mock-ups, like satirical kind of mock-ups of kind of well-known apps, where he imagines pretty sort of far out kind of features and how they could potentially add to an experience. And they're quite funny and often the sort of thing that you think, actually, that would be quite good. So this is an example where he's got like a DoorDash pop-up where the driver has requested if he can have a few fries on his way, where you're able to say yes or no. This is an example on I think it's like an airline booking app, where they're suggesting that you as a user would be able to kind of lock the seat recliner for the person in front of you by paying a few extra dollars, which would be quite good. this one's kind of sort of thinking about kind of taking the user's location, and if someone's sort of saying, like, how far away are you? I'm 5 minutes, then sort of like flagging and saying, well, according to Apple Maps, Cynthia's still at her house 21 minutes away. So really kind of playful sort of things. This one's maybe a little bit controversial, where you're allowing Lyft drivers to speed. You can pay $6 for turbo mode, and if you get caught, you pay the ticket, which I thought was, again, quite funny. So there's loads of this sort of stuff on his Twitter account. I think he's on Instagram as well, but they're kind of little playful kind of takes on UX sort of experiences. And then I've just got like a slide just really to kind of talk about why some of these examples might be so bad. I think obviously it's easy to judge and easy to kind of criticize websites when you sort of sat at home browsing them, but it may just be that it's old. Like some of those early examples that I looked at, they've probably just been left and no one's really looked at them for a long time. It may be on some things that there's been a lack of time and budget, where they've just had to knock something together quite quickly, and they've not had that time to pay that sort of care and attention. Naturally, I think a lot of these have just not had a lot of testing involved. I think as a UX group, I'm sure you guys talk a lot about user testing and the benefits of that. I think it's critical for that sort of thing. It might be that they're over-engineered. I think as a designer that's launched a lot of websites over the years, where me and my team have spent a lot of time making it look lovely and work lovely, you then give it to the client, or you've got another team that are working on creating sort of improvements to it, and then they just add more and more and more onto it to try and test things, and it just becomes a mess quite quickly. And obviously a lot of them not prioritizing key user needs, and they're bowing to commercial pressure or stakeholder pressure. And I think that, to me, comes down a lot of the time to lack of experience and lack of confidence in arguing the case as a designer as to why something is important and why it's important to prioritize the user. I think I've experienced that loads, where you're working on a website and you've got different departments within a business that all want to be on the homepage. They all want their message to be heard. You've got to be in that position as a designer to convince them why your suggestion is right, why it's right for the user. You've got to be able to prove that, and you've got to be able to back that up. So there's there's probably more. There's lots of reasons why all these websites are so bad. But I thought I'd end on some good news. Or maybe some hope for the future, because I think from my sort of experience and my perspective, the internet has definitely massively improved from a design perspective, and it's improving all the time. And I think user expectation, obviously drives that to an extent, but there's a few other factors that kind of give me hope. And I think, to me, one of them is the fact that web and UX design is definitely being treated more seriously. Since I first started in the industry, there's much more investment in good digital experiences. Lots of businesses are setting up their own kind of dedicated teams to constantly improve and iterate their products. There's definitely better education. I think like kids, like my kids are learning some of this sort of thing, some of the thing at school. So that's promising for kind of younger generations coming in, and they're not just having to kind of experiment like I did and learn as we go along. They're able to learn from sort of experienced people and their maybe mistakes. There's definitely a kind of what I would class as like some established patterns that have been set over the years. And I think these are now becoming more easily accessible to people. So there's lots of like UI kits available for your Figmas, for your Adobe XDs, where people are able to kind of take pre-made kind of designs that are tried and tested and build them into their work. There's pre-built components. Likewise, if you're creating a website in Shopify or Webflow, they're pre-built components that you can just kind of drag and drop and they're working. So they're less likely to break or less likely to be done in a way that doesn't make sense. And I think digital is definitely now becoming a more respected medium in terms of its craft. So back in my day, there was a lot of kind of print designers wouldn't go near digital. They thought it was just for all the geeks. I think designers and researchers are now moving into digital from other fields and have been doing for years now. I think it's obviously the kind of the dominant medium really when you start to think about design. And I think tech is potentially simplifying a lot of these processes for us as well. I'm sure you guys have have talked about AI in some respect, but I'm seeing more and more kind of examples of AI being able to kind of, I suppose, shortcut a lot of the work, a lot of the grunt work that people are doing from a design perspective, from a coding development perspective, to enable people to create much more efficiently and potentially much more consistently, which will obviously help with some of the stuff that we've been looking at. My worry is that then turns into another Wild West kind of scenario where you've got people that aren't necessarily that invested in design and UX, but they're able to kind of use AI to be able to create whatever they want, and it then becomes this big random kind of mess all over again. But we shall see. Obviously, it's time will tell as to how much AI will impact everything. But yeah, there we go. A whistle stop tour through some really horrible website designs and some UX practices. So yeah, I'm obviously open to any questions. I don't know if there was any questions in the chat as I was going along. Yeah, thank you very much.
Wow, Kev, I was laughing out loud. I was having so much fun. That was great. I loved your presentation, all the different gifts that you had in there, and gave some great examples of the bad and the ugly for sure, and why. I love that. So thanks so much for that. Yeah, we'll head it over to Gemma and let her ask you the questions that she's gotten together here.
Okay, Kev, there's a few questions from the chat, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Bob's asked, from a business perspective, what is the biggest challenge of doing UX business in the UK?
The biggest challenge in the UK, I think, to be honest, probably at the minute is budgets. I think obviously the financial kind of market across the world is quite bleak anyway, isn't it? I think a lot of companies are stripping back as much as possible on everything. So I don't think it's necessarily a kind of a UX specific thing. But I noticed quite significantly when I was leaving the agency, and this was even like a year and a half ago, that the budget sizes were constantly being kind of evaluated a lot more than they had been previously, which provides challenges. Because I think what's interesting to me is that it provides challenges to certain types of organizations. So as an agency, if we were working on a big UX project, there would probably be about 10 people involved in the first phase of that project. You would have maybe your creative director or your UX director, you'd have some designers involved within their team, you'd have your product owner, you'd have some developers, you'd have your account manager, you'd have your project manager. There's obviously that builds up costs. And when we were putting kind of quotes together for clients, you can see that constantly kind of just had to get stripped back. Whereas what I'm seeing now is an individual that's kind of doing more sort of consultancy work on my own. Because I've had that experience within an agency, and I'm almost able to do a lot of the work of those people myself to an extent. I'm able to kind of go in and do more sort of consultancy work. Obviously, I'm going to be a lot cheaper than an agency. So I think it's benefiting individuals and freelancers a lot more than sort of the large agencies or large consultancy firms is probably maybe a little bit of insight to the UK, but I would suggest that's probably the same worldwide. I don't think the UK is necessarily that different to what I've experienced in Europe and in the States and in the Far East. I think there's obviously always sort of similar challenges.
That's very good. I've got another question from Evan, who asks, what are your thoughts on websites that prioritize aesthetics over functionality?
Yes. So in my time at my previous agency, that was always a big thing when I was recruiting and trying to shape a team. And it varies massively within businesses, within agencies, as to how sort of design teams are shaped. I always tried to make sure that we had a good balance of designers that were UX focused, that were thinking about the user, that were thinking about the journey and the wider experience, but they were complemented by visual designers who were focused on the brand experience, the aesthetics of the website. I think it's always that balance of making sure that you've considered both. I think you'll see a lot of websites out there that work, that are really functional, that are great, but don't have that spark, that don't create that emotional connection with a visitor coming to it. So I think we always try to make sure that we did those hand in hand, and that it wasn't too far one way, because you did get, there was always challenges with some designers that were wanting to do something because it looked nice and because it had a nice level of impact, but you've always got to rein those type of people back in to make sure that it is functional. And likewise, you've got a lot of people that are maybe more of that UX mindset who think everything has to be just super functional and the same as this because it's what users are used to. There's always that place for innovation to do something slightly different, as long as it's still usable, it's still functional. So yeah, I see so many websites on a daily basis, on all of these kind of award websites where they're all just lists of nice sites that people have kind of uploaded. And a lot of the time it is a bit style over substance on those type of websites, lots of animations, lots of things where you just, I don't know, you can hardly kind of digest the content. But I think, again, that to me comes back to that experience. I think if you're working in a team where you've got someone that's got that level of experience where they're able to kind of spot that and be able to, I don't know, take a step back and think, can someone read that? Can they digest it? Can they find this level of information? Yeah, it's just a constant case of evaluating and testing your work, really.
Thank you. I've got one last question from Susan, which is a really good one to end on. Do you have a personal worst website from your own portfolio?
Oh,
and
God.
She adds, I once was awarded a patent for preventing the browser back button from working.
Amazing. That's great. Oh God, an example of like my worst example. Does it have to still be live? I mean, if I think back to some of the websites I was doing when I was in my early 20s, there's some shockers there. I've still got like screen grabs of them somewhere on an old hard drive, but it's definitely something that I kind of try and hide away. You're always, I mean, when you're starting out, you're always going to create something that's not great. You're always going to look back on stuff and think, oh my God, why did I do that? Why is that something that I created? Stuff that I do now, I feel like most of the stuff that I'm kind of working on at the minute, because I've been kind of a lot more hands-on over the last year and a half and quite prolific in terms of putting out websites, much more in comparison to working in an agency where you're working on year-long, sometimes projects that take ages to get released. I feel like I'm proud of the stuff that I'm doing at the minute. But yeah, there was a lot of stuff within the agency where I would say I was proud of the design work and the thinking that went into it, but not necessarily proud of the finished product, because everything would then go to a development team. Often the stuff that had come back wouldn't be as you imagined it. The budget will have been cut. We'll be going back sort of saying, no, that's wrong, that needs to be changed to this, and then it wouldn't get done because there's not enough time left in the budget. So there was loads of stuff that we launched within the agency. Not everything, obviously, a lot of it was great and some great stuff, but there was often kind of a lot of frustrations within the design team as to kind of final products within sort of the agency environment, definitely. I'm not going to name one. I'm not going to send a link to one.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I think we have one last question from Sarah, and she said, what does he do to always continue learning? What is the most recent thing you've learned?
Great question. I mean, that's been like my kind of the thing that I focused on most in my career. It's like that's what I enjoy. I think I'm lucky enough to have a job that I actually almost feel is like a hobby. Like this sort of stuff that I do, even if I wasn't working in this field, I probably would do it anyway. So I'm constantly trying to learn and explore different stuff. So I'd say in the last few years, learning Webflow has been a big thing for me, both sort of from a development perspective and financially, because it essentially enabled me to go freelance. It enabled me to leave the agency and to feel confident that I would get enough work in. So like I said at the start, when I was in the agency, I was more sort of managing the process of managing people, managing that early stage, and I wasn't getting the kind of fulfillment from actually creating something and designing and being proud of launching it. So I kind of chose to kind of learn Webflow because it seemed the perfect product for me, because it was it's a design tool, but it kind of does a lot of the code aspect for you, but still does it well. You need to understand code, which I do, but you don't need to do the hands-on kind of like typing all the code stuff. It's a visual code sort of generator tool or whatever. So Webflow was one. I mean, I play around with loads of things around like After Effects and Blender. So I've been doing bits of 3D work on a client project recently, just creating these random 3D blobs that move, because it was all part of the brand system that I created. So I constantly try and test myself and come up with ideas of stuff that I know that I probably don't know how to do, just so I can learn how to do it.